Всем привет!
Hi, everyone.
Начинаем вебинар
Let's begin this webinar about the
о
soul,
душе, о том, как с чего мы состоим,
about what we are
сознание
made of,
и
about
что
animal
происходит
consciousness,
в жизни.
and what
Я рад
happens
вас
after
видеть.
life.
Так, проверяю,
Glad to see you.
все ли у нас в эфире.
I'm checking to see that everything's working.
Итак,
Let's start.
я начну с
First of all,
того,
I'd like to say
я хочу прежде всего сказать, что
that
этот
this webinar,
вебинар
in a sense, is a
это
continuation
в
of
каком-то
other
смысле
webinars.
продолжение того, что мы делаем на других вебинарах.
How
В каком
so?
смысле? Когда мы разобрались с тем, что нас там
When we have
за
figured out
пределами
what
ожидает,
awaits us
ожидает
there
вас и
beyond
так
life,
далее,
how we got here, and so
возникла
on,
масса вопросов.
a lot of
Какое
questions
дело,
arose
как
along the
же
way.
животные, а
What
как
about
другие виды
animals? What about other
сознания и
types of
говорится так.
consciousness, and so on and
И
so
вот,
forth?
я в анонсе обещал
So,
прежде всего,
in the
что мы
announcement, I
берем
promised,
о
first of all,
потере
that we are going to take away the
близких,
pain
и
of
это будет.
losing loved
Это
ones.
будет. И
This will
объясню,
happen.
почему
You
это
shall see.
будет. Потому что
And
если вы
I would like to
действительно
tell you why, because if you
поймете
really
то,
get what
что
I'm
я
telling you,
сегодня рассказываю, у вас просто не останется шанса,
you
кроме
will
как
simply have no choice but
это
to
принять.
abide in joy.
Начну
Let me
с
start with
чего?
this.
Я надеюсь,
I
что
hope that
люди,
people who
которые
have experienced
испытывали
the boundless feeling of
героические
unconditional love are
чувства
present here.
любви, здесь находятся. А, И чтобы понимать, о чем мы
Firstly,
сегодня
in order to
говорим,
understand what we are talking about today,
как это можно вообще понимать,
how to deal with it all,
я хочу
I
объяснить,
would
что мы
like to
говорим в
explain
первом
that we are
аспекте о
talking from the
сознании и о
premise that
его.
consciousness is
Это
one.
первое. Второе. Время это
Secondly,
относительный
time is a
параметр,
relative parameter. To
по-другому
put it differently,
не
time does not
говорить. Ну,
exist.
я о времени, о физике и так далее
I've talked about
рассказывал в
time,
открытом
about
вебинаре,
physical matter, and
ссылка
so
есть
on at an open webinar.
Не буду здесь
You
об
can
этом
find the
говорить.
link to it here. I won't talk about it further.
Существует
So
единственный
there is
закон
only
бытия.
one law of
Эти
existence.
три
Look, there are
позиции,
three main
если вы их
points,
осознаете,
which, if
понимаете,
you get
вам
them,
и
it would be
будет
easy to
легко
follow
дальше.
along and it
Все,
will
что мы
all
здесь
make
будем
sense.
проходить, легко это абсолютно будет понятно. Если эти аспекты сложные,
If these
непонятные или
aspects are too
неприемлемые, то
complex,
все, о чем мы будем
incomprehensible, or
говорить, для вас будет
unacceptable,
непонятно,
then everything
неприемлемо.
we
Скорее
talk
всего,
about
вы
today will be
не
equally
воспринимаете
incomprehensible.
этот вид
It is
информации.
possible one simply doesn't resonate with this type of
Теперь
information.
я сделал акцент, три вводных.
Now, I
В них
emphasize
я
the three key
объяснял,
points.
я чуть-чуть остановлюсь, да, о законе бытия и скажу
I'll
чуть
explain a bit
позже,
about the law of
почему это
existence
важно.
and why it matters.
А, Сейчас я просто
Now,
хочу
let me state here
заметить,
that
что то, чем я лично
what
занимаюсь,
I
то, чем я
personally do, what I
рассказываю,
talk
исходит
about, comes
из
exclusively
исключительно
from physical
физических
laws, which are
законов,
based on one
в
single
основе
law.
которого есть только один закон.
I
Повторюсь, я об
repeat,
этом
I talked
рассказывал
about
на
this at the
вебинаре
Physics of
«Materialize».
Existence webinar.
Люди, которые предполагают,
People who
что
assume that
есть
there are
много
many
разных
different
десятков
incoherent
законов,
laws that are
которые там
just
собираются,
randomly flying
переплетаются,
somewhere,
это, скажем так, мягко
these are
говоря,
people that, to
не
put it
совсем обладающие
mildly,
базой.
do not have a solid foundation. You
Понимаете?
see,
То есть, если вы
if you
понимаете, как
understand how
бытие
beingness
проявляется,
comes
то есть
into existence, that is, in
каким
physical
термином
terms,
сознание возникло,
consciousness
возникла
arose, the
Вселенная, да,
universe
что-то
arose,
из
how it is
какого-то
born
одного
from a
импульса, и
single
дальше оно
impulse and then
расслаивается, умножается.
diversified itself
Вот
into
в чем
many
смысл.
different ones. That's the
Это
point.
очень важно,
This is very
ключевое, потому
important, a
что без
key
этого
understanding,
всегда
because
хаос в голове,
without
непонятно
this,
откуда
a
что берется.
person has
То есть для меня
chaos
принципиально
in
важно,
one's head
почему
regarding
существует
where
такое
everything comes
начало.
from. For me,
Для
it
меня
is vitally
принципиально важно.
important.
Все, что я
That's why
рассказываю,
such an
всегда
introduction.
должно иметь
For
соответствие
me, it
с
is vitally
физикой
important that
обязательно.
everything I talk about
В
must
микроуровне,
always
на
have
макроуровне
correspondence with the
все
physical
эти
world.
одинаковые
It
законы
is a requirement at the
тождественны.
micro and macro levels,
Они показывают,
and
как
that all
работает
these laws
сознание, как
equally
работает ум,
apply.
как работают
They
отношения
show how
и
consciousness
все, что
works, how the
входит
mind works, how relationships work, and
в
everything that
открытии
is
базового
created in the world.
бытия,
According to the
базового
basic law of
мышления.
existence, which is also the basic law
Итак,
for the whole physical world.
вот
So,
здесь
here we can
схематично нужно
schematically
представить
imagine
это
this
как
as one
некий
universal law,
закон,
how
как чистый
pure
белый
white light
свет,
enters
закон
into our
бытия в
universe.
нашу
One can
Вселенную. Можете
perceive this as a
воспринимать это
primary
как,
explosion
как там, первичный взрыв. И создает
creating a
некое
certain
будущее.
multitude. And so
И вот, теперь
now we
если
abruptly move
переходим
on
к
to the
теме
topic
душа.
soul.
Я почему
Why do I
вообще
take soul here?
душу здесь беру, чтобы
It's in
изначально
order to initially
появилось
disrupt the
восприятие этого
perception of
слова.
this word.
Обычно мы воспринимаем, что
Usually,
учили
we
нас.
perceive
Нужно понимать, что это
we were
все
taught
наш
this way.
социум,
We
наша
need to
культура.
realize that this is
Смотрите,
all
когда вы
social
слышите
conditioning,
слово
our
душа,
training. Look, when you hear the word
мы сейчас
soul,
говорим о физике сейчас,
by the
но
way, we are talking
ребенкам
about the
больше
physical
понятно.
world
Когда
now,
вы слышите слово
but
душа,
this will become clear
обычно мы
later.
представляем себе
When you
какой-то
hear the
цвет,
word soul, we usually imagine some
да,
kind of a balloon,
у
right?
его
That is,
душа,
he
мелкая
has a
душа,
soul, his
большая
soul,
душа.
a
Тут
small
твою
soul, a
нужно
big soul, a
носить, она
huge
может
soul.
куда-то улететь,
It can be
да,
stolen,
и
it can
сейчас
fly
такое
away
написали,
somewhere,
отделенное.
right? And what else? Like
Моя
a
душа,
balloon,
к примеру,
it's separate.
супергерой,
My
и
soul,
чья-то там
for
другая.
example, is a
Вот эти
superhero. And here
столкнулись
is someone
и
else's soul,
разлетелись.
let's say. We collided
Вот
somewhere,
посмотрите в свое
pats, and
понимание
flew
слова
apart.
душа внутри.
Take a look at your own perception of the word soul, your
Я
inner
сейчас не говорю, как
perception.
это
I'm not
делать, я сейчас
telling you
говорю
this is how it
исключительно само
is.
восприятие, потому что мы
I
сейчас
am telling,
говорим
look at the
очень
perception
много
itself because we are now
само
talking
слово
about
с ним
how to
связано.
deal with the
И
word
очень много
itself.
спекуляций на
As it
эту
has
тему,
certain
да,
connections, there is a
что
lot of
можно украсть,
speculation on the
забрать.
subject, like that it could be
А еще,
stolen,
знаете,
taken
спекуляция,
away.
вот, допустим, у
Another
животного маленькая
speculation is,
душа,
say, an
мужская,
animal has a small
вообще
soul,
нет.
if any at all. Well, maybe there isn't any at all. But humans, well, humans have a big soul, such a big
Каждый
soul.
хочет, чтобы у него было
Everyone wants
больше.
to have a larger one,
Понимаете?
and naturally, all this
Естественно, вся эта
speculation around this
спекуляция с этой
subject
темой
creates concepts like
создает
the soul has
вот
flown
такое вот,
away
она
somewhere that
куда-то
one could
улетела,
sell it,
пропадает,
bargain with
нужно
it. Furthermore,
подстраховаться.
the soul can
Дальше
walk
душа где-то
somewhere
ходит,
with legs,
может
arms, who
помиручка, не
knows that
знаю,
it can burn.
горит
In
там
someone's
где-то,
view, someone is
кто-то там
celebrating holidays
получает
somewhere,
праздники
visiting someone,
где-то,
someone's
посещает
soul.
кого-то.
In other words,
Тут
it
как
is
бы
seen as a
очень
separate
отделенное.
entity.
Смотрите, в это
Look,
понятие, вот
this
что такое в
concept that
голове
is
у
in our
меня, там
heads, it seems to
есть
have length and
и
width inside.
длина, ширина, даже вот
It
взвешивают,
is sometimes even
да,
being weighed,
килограмме.
how many
Оно
grams there
как бы
are.
по времени куда-то двигается.
It
То
seems to
есть
be
все это в
moving somewhere in
принципе
time.
противоречит
All
тому, с
this,
чего я начал,
in
базовым законам
principle,
физики, что
contradicts the basic laws of physics, the
эти
fundamentals which I
термины
have
за
started
пределами
with.
физики, за
And
пределами
so,
трехмерного измерения, это
outside of the
невозможно
physical
вычислить.
three
Это
dimensional world,
сравнительные
these are all
параметры, вес,
impossible
вес,
things. These are
не
all relative
имеют ни одного
parameters
смысла.
length, width, weight. They are all
А,
comparisons. They do
Теперь
not
смотрите,
exist on their
и
own. Now, look,
как
how
можно
can one
вообще
compare the
сравнить
soul?
душу и как это
And
можно
how can one
физически
physically
увидеть?
see it?
И я вам сегодня
A bit later,
дальше,
I will show
я
you,
попытаюсь
you know,
показать,
since we are tied to the physical,
знаете, раз мы к физике
to
уже
balloons,
привязаны где-то
I
вот
will
здесь,
try
я
to untie
попытаюсь
you at
рассказать
least from the
расширенно
idea of balloons
грешников
to
к
something
нечему
larger.
большему. И покажу
And
это,
I
как
will
это
show
можно
how this can
воспринимать с
be
точки зрения
perceived from the
физики,
point of view of physics,
почему это
why one can
воспринимается, и
perceive it.
еще раз делаю
And
это
once
важным за
again,
счет
let me
того,
point
что
this
я
out.
начал
I have
доклад
started
свой
the
для
webinar
меня
with it.
принципиально
It is
важно,
fundamentally
что все это
important to me
абсолютно едино
that all
повторяет
this is
единый
absolutely
паттерн развития.
uniformly
То
repeated
есть планеты
everywhere in the
не
same
взяты
way according
просто
to the
там еще
same law.
кусок,
That
там
is,
кусок слепили,
the
перепутали,
concepts are not simply
перепилили.
randomly
Это все
taken, a
единая
piece here, a
структура. И
piece
вы с
there, a
вами,
bit of glue,
почему
a
мы об
bit of
этом
tape,
говорим,
thought, rethought,
ну, это
shaped,
имеет смысл.
reshaped. This is all a unified
Давайте
single
посмотрим
structure, and now
чуть-чуть,
you will
совсем
understand
вкратце.
why we are talking
Первые
about this, why it
элементы
matters.
с точки
Let's
зрения
have a brief
физики,
look.
в данном
The
случае
first
биологии,
elements in
есть
terms of
первые
the
элементы
physical
планеты.
world, in this case, biology.
То есть первые
Where do the
клетки.
first
Если
organisms
вы не
come
знаете, на
from?
сегодняшний день
Like the first cells.
считается, что
If anyone doesn't know,
на
today the idea
линейной
is that
смотрим, раньше
if we
некоторые
look at
элементы
linear time,
соединились,
a long time
потом
ago,
они так
certain chemical
соединились, что
elements
они
were
стали представлять собой
reacting and
единую
combining
молекулу,
and then
а
somehow
потом клетки
connected in
начали
such a way
собираться
that
как
they
бы в
began to
органы.
resemble
То есть
cells,
не в органы, а
and then
в
the cells somehow assembled themselves
колония
into
клеток как
organs, or
единую молекулу,
rather,
вот как симбиоз работает.
a colony of cells
И
working
знаете,
as a
вот здесь вот
single
какой момент,
organism
что
in a symbiosis. And you know, here's
для
an
нас в рядах
interesting
будет
part.
понятно,
It
вот
will
эти
be clear on
все,
the
вы
example of
представьте
mushrooms. All these mushrooms, look,
той отправной точкой,
became a starting point, the starting
той
point,
отправной точкой,
after
после
which they gathered
которого
together.
вот они
And so
наблюдали,
one mushroom
после
can
них
be
вот
considered as
рождается
one organ.
один орган, то есть собрались в один орган.
The
Они
mushrooms
начали
began to
выделяться по
develop
линии
along the
мы
line.
растениями, и по линии мы
Let's be
будем
plants and
животными,
also
например.
along the lines.
Смотрите,
Let's be the animal
наши
kingdom, the
предки
fauna. Well, that's what it
древние,
is. So
ну,
actually, our
если
ancestors are
поздороваться со
mushrooms.
своими
Here,
прародителями,
you
да,
can say hello to your great
поколенчески,
grandfathers. And you know, when
карму
someone
рода,
works to
да, мы
resolve the
говорим
family's karma,
претензии
all your complaints
и
should
основы.
go to the
Все.
mushrooms. That's where
А
the
сейчас у
root
меня
is.
антилайков
That's
появится
it.
от
So
кармических
now I'm going to get
получек.
dislikes from karmic healing folks.
И почему я
Oh,
про
well,
грибы
that's
сейчас
okay.
вообще
Why am I
говорю?
even
Потому
talking about
что
mushrooms now.
Смотрите,
Because look, For some reason, these first creatures began to unite, yet they didn't have survival instincts. Where would they get them from if they were all just elements? No instincts. Instinct, that's when we are talking about the past. And they didn't have a past, they just got united. Now, here's an important point. Mushrooms are not really, you see, they are based on, how should I put it, the roots. This is a mycoid network, also called hyphae. Mycologists are those who deal with mushrooms. Here is a mushroom. This mushroom came to me today, almost literally. Well, I stomped my feet towards it, but this is a separate topic. I just knew I walked and knew where it would be waiting for me. And look, the base is the actual network, from which I removed a unit, because the mushroom itself is that large network, and this part is only its representative, so to speak. In other words, it all gathers through this network and becomes one organ. For those who may not know, this is only the outer form, an organ that, let's call it that, is a representative of a mushroom. And just like a network of primary elements assembled itself, it later assembled itself into a certain organism. Using the same principle, consider one mushroom as an element of an organ. This is how organs are assembled inside a human body. It is also based on a network. Why am I talking about this now? Because we are making an analogy. If we consider the global system of existence, consciousness, and everything in general, it is assembled from smaller parts, which then combined into a certain organ. And this organ later joins further in its turn. And so it becomes larger and larger. All our organs represent certain units of consciousness. Those who have studied biology, well, it is a well-known subject by now, that everything is not as simple as it seemed before. And so, in the end, we have a body assembled out of, let's say, units of consciousness in a certain sense. And here we are as a whole. Someone wrote a comment, a mushroom is a genital organ. This is not quite the correct definition, but we as a body are like a kind of mushroom that has been woven together from certain units. We ourselves have woven ourselves together. Let me continue and tell you how this process occurs. Now, look, in order to understand, once again, a single law works for everything. We are now looking at the level of biology, how it all developed. Next, let's see how it is created at the cosmic level. All right. Quite recently, two interesting conclusions were drawn. Well, there are even three. Look, firstly, it turned out that when the various galaxies were photographed, it turned out that they do not just randomly hang in the sky, but they are connected in the same way as our neural networks are interconnected. Indeed, galaxies, a huge structure that is very similar to the neural networks of the brain. And recently, there was a work by one of the Microsoft employees, scientists who were engaged in artificial intelligence, saw an absolute likeness to the universe by the way they were creating connections. And in this work, it was carefully alluded so not to offend anyone, God forbid, the scientific brains or the scientific beliefs of the foregoers, those old mushrooms, so to speak. They said, look, the neural network of the universe strictly corresponds to what we've created as artificial intelligence. What is a neural network, actually, from a programming point of view? It is a thing that teaches itself, becomes smarter, 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 and smarter. The universe looks as if it is teaching itself and becoming smarter. Well, of course, everyone laughed. Funny, isn't it? But technically, it's true. The second specific aspect, I didn't want to talk about it at all, but I'll touch on it briefly. It's very strange too. For example, neural networks are also a type of a web. There are individual neurons that seem to be connected by so-called synapses, that is, certain nerve endings, and there was much fuss about it for a long time, about the connectors there. I don't know, this photo is probably not really visible here now. And just recently, scientific research appeared from a serious institute that stated that it was found out that in addition to synapses, neurons transmit information to each other by themselves, let's say telepathically. Naturally, at first it was dismissed as nonsense that this could not be the case. Then they checked, double checked, then others came and carried out experiments. Indeed, information from one neuron was transmitted to another neuron without neural connections. It was very weak, but it was transmitted. Scientists don't yet know how to interpret this and what it is. This happened around 2021. And there is the same situation in regard to galaxies, the empty space between them. This is my hint that here too, the information is also being transmitted. Now look, I'd like to play you a short video for you to watch. This is what the photographed universe looks like. I edited it a little bit and added some comments. From the point of view of modern cosmology, not even that, but it doesn't matter. Well, this is what it all looks like. Now, we just talked about the mushroom network, how all the organs are literally intertwined in the body in the sense of a network. Take a look. This is how it looks in space. So as you know, there is the Earth, the Sun, and other planets revolving around the Sun. This is approximately what our galaxy looks like. This is a simulation made by scientists. Here somewhere it seems like a random point among other galaxies. However, measurements and studies have shown that it all looks like a single structure. This is the 3D model. And this is roughly what this structure looks like many branches. And the red dot is one of the branches of many galaxies where our galaxy is located. Yet all this is a single structure of sorts. This is roughly how you can look at it in 3D rotation. It turned out that this structure is not static. All this happens as a movement. Here is a movement towards a certain center. This is called the great attractor, that is, what attracts and pulls in. And there is also something that seems to flow out of there, outflowing. It is like breathing, inhaling and exhaling. In the center, there seem to be several different centers. It's like breathing in and out. And it's also like two hemispheres of the brain, right? Does it sound familiar? This is the center and two hemispheres, two different frequencies. So you see that we can imagine the great attractor as breathing. So to speak, it's our central. It is something on which, as we understand it, our chakras are. Yin-yang, Ida, Pingala, Sushumna. Absolutely similar processes take place through breathing. These are absolutely similar processes. As I said, it is identical on macro and micro levels. It's all connected. This is approximately how it works. Now, our ego is aiming. Note, it is certainly our little ego in this 3D reality, our current system, aiming to lock itself into a balloon and pretend I don't want to know anything about others, because we seem to be attempting to distance ourselves from others, although we are a part of such a network. Furthermore, in reality, everything is much more, despite the fact that the ego strives to be this little balloon, as it is a very familiar space for it, as if saying, don't touch me, I'm in my little burrow. You are actually always at the center. If you understand the principle of beyond time and space, albeit a bit difficult to understand for someone hearing it for the first time, you are always in the center. That is your definition of I, without adding I am this and I am that, rather the very first I. It is this center, the center of the universe to be precise, and all the rest are just some of your various definitions. Let me point out, against the background of the aforementioned, that now if you have seen this as well as my idea in 3D, in 3D physics, I repeat, how can you visualize what the soul looks like? Suppose you say, well, not you personally, but someone says, this is the soul like a balloon. There are many of us souls here. And I would say from my personal experience and observation, say through samadhi, what I witness in nature, what I see in the system, what I know, and from information that reaches me in a certain way, let's leave it at that. The way I see it, the soul looks like this. And if we are talking about the size of the soul, then at least look at this. This is the minimum size and appearance of your soul. We can also look at these arrows as a conjunction with others, let's call it souls. And so we are interconnected throughout this entire system. We move, we intersect, we are all together. Each of us is unique, and each creates our own version of the visible universe. Do you see the sky? It is you looking at yourself from the inside. And you are not small, not in the least. You are everything. We interact with other people not like jostling balloons, rather like in this diagram, intersecting, overflowing, and so on. At the same time, we each retain our individuality, not because our ego is fighting for it. These are just different principles. I've told you about its mechanics in other webinars. Now, I would like to emphasize that this is all intertwined. That's how everything works. Biology, cosmology, everything works this way. And trying to squeeze oneself into a small balloon is to spit in the face of, say, common sense. Now, when you come in contact with someone, you could roughly view any contact this way. That focus of how we define ourselves as a personality. We come into contact with another being, with anyone. How does a contact occur? Who studied this aspect, let's say, with me? For them, it will be very easy to understand. I hope so. In general, any contact, for example, someone told you something, you take it in your perception. Your worldview has shifted a little. That is, something was actually set in motion. Let's say a person who accepts someone else's opinion or simply listens to it or has his or her own opinion about someone. This is actually the primary process, and it's not merging into something incomprehensible, rather an exchange of perception. That is, you remain, yet in a somewhat modified way. Okay, I hope if you understand a little bit what the physical world is. I repeat, I reference here my other webinars, specifically the free webinar, Physics of Existence. You see that there are no boundaries. Where one ends, something else begins. There are no boundaries between souls. That is, any boundary is the ego telling you that it is a boundary. If you understand this technically, you are already half a step closer to a deeper understanding of yourself. If you have already begun to realize this directly, then you have taken a serious step in your personal development. Here is a small example. Those who know what quantum connections are know that they exist outside of time and space. They already understand that there are no barriers in the universe. Everything flows into one another. Now we come to this. If this is more or less clear, it is one of the fundamental aspects. I'd like to point out what a connection is. When you really merge with someone, when you say, I am you, you are me, when such a connection is established, We're talking about this feeling of oneness. In other words, you recognize that another, just as you are, is also a part of one oversoul or one being, if you wish. And you don't really lose yourself. See, the connection forms like this. This is me, plus another me, plus a third me. And now, these pluses here are, in fact, the feeling of love. This is the zone of merging. Inside the zone of the plus signs, you cannot distinguish who is who when you love someone. I encourage you to look inside yourself, to feel it this very moment. When you love someone, be it a person or an animal, you know this state. You want to give them a hug, right? Can you recall embracing someone? Or you can go give them a hug now. Can you feel it? Just like this, and you seem to have become one, just like this. And there is no longer you versus me. There is only one. This is the moment, the experience of love, where you merge, the point of union occurs. This is what can be called unconditional love, when you have no claims and no criteria for the other creature, person, or animal. What kind of eyes, ears, mouth, nose it should have, or anything else, how it should treat you. There is just love, period. A moment of union. I hope I have conveyed this more or less clearly. If you imagine this structure now, let's take it further. Let's just take this cosmic view as a basis. Somewhere you have defined yourself as a certain I, your personality. It exists and it is fixed. It does not change. Then it continues through what is really very close to you, through what is truly yours, which is felt as a part of your soul. I will talk about it a bit later. It is literally like this. People often want to hear, that part of their soul is another person. It may be a person, maybe even more than one. We feel a little closer to people, but I'd say it could also be an animal. And another part could be another animal, maybe third, fifth. Not just one animal, there could be a million of them. For some, a deer could be a part of their soul, perhaps a bit more distant, but you have a criterion, an indicator. When there is mutual love for this creature, you can be sure that you have a common point of merging, of union. You can say that this is a part of your soul without any reservations nor doubts, without looking back. There is no need to analyze whether its part is small or large, whether it is almost a soul or not quite. It is absolutely the same structure. I'll now explain what the difference is. Now please take a look at this perception of the soul and this one. I'm sure I am getting a bunch of dislikes here. I mean, people would go like, how dare you compare me to an animal? What is he saying? It's unacceptable. How can you compare me to an animal? Some may run away now. Oh well, we're here, right? I hope the rest of us are still here. The ones who can at least feel it, right? Now that we've moved away from the idea of balloons, I would like to tell you about my experience of my initial perception outside of time. This is a view of how it was arranged. It looked something like this bunch of grapes, all incarnations at once. You see everything as one structure, not forward in time, not as future nor past, rather as all your lives together. This is an approximate model, 3D. Outside of time, outside of the past. They all exist, they are all there, yet not encroaching on you at all. existing in a parallel way. This is an approximate model of existence. Now, guys, let me explain it quite simply. Look, at some point you took on this structure and entered the earth, entered into the vibrations of the earth, that is, into the three-dimensional world. The earth also has its own structure. I have made a simplified drawing here. It is an interweaving of many things. Our DNA works on the principle of tuning, like musical notes. That is, all these DNA things, let's call them codes. We tune in and we perceive ourselves as a person. It is our perception of our embodiment of some large infinite soul into this personality that defines itself, in our case here, as a human being. At the same time, different DNA settings, I am talking about your DNA, not necessarily when you exist as a human. I mean the broader understanding of you as a soul that we have just explored. If you go through other settings, you incarnate as a certain animal. Further, when you personally incarnate in two bodies, one as a human and another as an animal, and you do this on purpose, then you meet each other. Then you and this specific animal can have a phenomenal mutual feeling of this love unity in both directions. Because you are one soul, if we were to use these terms. Look, human DNA gives you the option to choose anything from everything. I get it. That it can be hard for people to comprehend. How does this work? An animal. The animal DNA gives you, and by you I mean the I am, the option of choosing something specific from something predefined. Let me explain. How does someone define oneself? By collecting a bunch of various topics where he puts his focus on, thereby gaining the ability to think, to reason, and so on. And then he gets all sorts of ideas, like one needs to wash hands before meals, needs to wear underpants, to love his motherland. He starts thinking using these categories. Inside, there is a kind of commentator stating, you are doing the right thing. This is the wrong thing. This is fair. This is unfair. The motherland, the party, these nice people, those unpleasant ones. We often think in these categories, and this is what makes us human. When a part of our I am is incarnated in an animal, the categories are different. Look, just compare these experiences. While you are washing your pants and loving your motherland, the dog would simply say, this dachshund smells good, but that cat doesn't. That is, dogs, well, any animal, they have a different setting, different categories. An animal looks directly into what is, at the same time, it feels a connection with the self, the I. It understands that you and it are one, especially when you're indeed one, as dogs, well, animals immediately know this. They don't do any thinking about it, they just know right away, and they immediately sense the criteria, whether it feels right or not. The dog doesn't analyze whether this is his motherland or someone maybe without panties. Thus, in regard to humans, one could say, first he himself came up with it, then he got upset by it. That's just how we roll. Dogs, excuse me for using the example of a dog all the time. It is here in the picture. It applies to any animal. They feel it, they live it. They live inside the experience that is directly felt. And just as a small example, when you incarnate through the DNA of a dog, excuse me, I am saying you, meaning your I am, you directly feel unconditional love for somebody and express it. Well, you have such an inclination. When you are, say, in a cat, you have a tendency to choose the best. This way you use different DNAs, like different mirrors. Thus, you choose different accents.
То есть вы, как бы, знаете, разные акценты. То есть в птичке вы воплотились,
By
допустим,
incarnating in a bird,
да,
for
как
example, you
проявить
express your dream of flying. So, one can observe the
если
mechanism
вы
of thinking.
понаблюдаете
If you carefully
тень
observe an
мышления, то
animal,
есть если
how it
хорошо
analyzes, from what it draws
наблюдать, как оно
conclusions, what it
делает
pays
выводы,
attention
делать
to,
выводы,
why do cats
на
appear
что он обращает
uncontrollable?
внимание, почему коты не
But
управляют
they only
собой,
seem uncontrollable. Actually, they always choose the
управляемые,
best
они всегда
option.
выбирают лучше. Вот это лучше
This is
сейчас,
better
лучше
now,
сейчас,
this is
лучше сейчас.
better
Вот
now,
это
and now, as
самоопределение
for your
есть.
opinions, they are
И
irrelevant.
при этом кот к вам приходит, к вас обнимает, ты мой любимый,
And
мой
at the
любимый.
same time, the cat
Потом
comes
хоп,
to you,
что-то
hugs you,
он
you are
всегда
my
выбирает
darling, my dear,
лучшее.
and
Собака может
then
выбрать
hop and
только
something else is
один, да,
better.
ради того,
That
чтобы
is, it always chooses the
вам
best
помогать.
option. A dog can
Это не
sacrifice
является
its best for
полное
your sake,
описание,
yes?
почему,
This
почему
is not a
это
complete
поступило.
description of how and why, it's just an example, okay?
И если так посмотреть, да,
If you
то
look at it this way, then the
да,
animal's DNA has
ограничения очень серьезные в
very
коммуникации,
serious
потому что
limitations
оно
in terms of
неполноценно
communication
описывает,
because it is looking at
хотя это
itself.
одинаковое
And
описание.
if you
Когда
read
животное
this,
ограничивает способы
it's
коммуникации между
exactly the
вами,
same description.
но продвигает
Animal
точки
DNA
зрения
limits the ways you
в
can
себе. То
communicate
есть
between you,
то, что в вашем и есть, то есть там,
but
сверхдушевное,
promotes what you need to
сверхдуховное,
realize about
нагнетает и
yourself,
делает
meaning what your I am, oversoul, or your
И вы то
soul
же
needs to
самое
realize. It
делаете.
will do it, including for you here.
Вы отказываетесь коммуницировать с животным на его языке,
And you are
например,
doing the
это
same.
ваши
You
правила.
refuse to communicate with the animal in its
Это ваши
language. You
настройки.
impose some of your rules, but these are your settings.
А,
It is the way it is.
так, теперь, перед тем, как мы пойдем
Now,
дальше,
before we go any
прежде чем
further,
мы
and we
пойдем,
will definitely go further,
получается, я могу
there's a
быть
question from the
друзьям, быть и
audience.
человеком, и
So,
животным.
it turns out
А,
that in one life's incarnation, I can be
Этих
both a human and an
возможных
animal. Look, in one life, well,
взаимоотношений это
in one
очень
life, in one incarnation, you are a human
здорово.
being.
В
Let's put
одном
it a little
времени и
differently.
пространстве вы можете
In
воплотиться
one time and space, you can
как
incarnate as
людьми,
both humans and
так и
animals. And you do
животными.
this all the
Вы это
time,
делаете постоянно, так еще и
and even
растениями.
as plants.
Вы это делаете
You do
постоянно,
this all
это
the
мы можем
time for many
посмотреть. Мы
purposes. Let's
еще
look
не
at some more
коснулись
aspects
растений,
now.
сейчас посмотрим. Да, и пословица, ну,
Yes, the
поговорка,
proverb,
животное похоже
or
на
the saying that
хозяина,
a pet
конечно,
resembles its
правда.
owner, of course.
Ну,
Yes, it's
смотрите,
true. All right.
с этим, я надеюсь,
I hope it
более-менее
is more or
понятно.
less
Теперь
clear so
пойдем
far. Now
более
let's move on,
на
shall we?
тему. Вам нравится
Do
море?
you like the
Да, странный,
sea?
да, вопрос.
An odd question, right? Look, here is the sea
Море
on the
как
tablet.
лягушачье.
And so you are looking at the sea on a tablet.
Посмотрите, допустим,
It may be a bit hard to see
море
from
как
here.
лягушачье. Ну, вам понятно, плохо сейчас видно.
Here is a tablet, a
Вот
device.
планшет, устройство, через него проходит.
How does
Как
the sea appear
представляется
here?
море?
Some electrical tangles pass through some
Включение
settings.
электрических
We get the
эскизов,
visuals of the
какие-то
sea,
настройки, получаем море. И мы можем смотреть
and
и
we
говорить,
can look at
блин,
it and say,
прикольно,
I
когда
love
я
the
на
sea, and
картинке
feel
смотрю,
this
это классно.
wow
Мы же так реагируем на картинки. Ну,
by
все
looking
люди
at the
делают.
picture. This is how we react to pictures.
Видим и сразу ощущаем, что
We
это
see
море.
and immediately feel that this is it.
Если
But
море
is
в
there a
экране,
sea inside the screen?
вот вы, я надеюсь,
So
здравомыслящие
you are,
люди, да?
hopefully, sensible, intelligent people.
Смотрите, я
Here's
сейчас
the
включу.
screen. Look, I'll turn it off
О,
now. And the sea
вы
disappeared.
скажете, море исчезло. О,
And you will say,
море, море
ah, the
идет.
sea has disappeared.
Или как, вы
He killed the
скажете,
sea. The sea
отдай
is
мне,
gone.
подари мне этот
Or you
планшет,
might say,
потому
give
что
it to
там
me,
море.
gift this
Ой,
tablet to
я
me,
теперь
because
буду
the sea
плакать,
is
потому
there.
что нету моря у меня.
Oh, now I'm going to cry because I don't have the sea because it was turned off.
Электроны перестали
The
бегать,
electrons
да,
stopped running,
когда
right? And we
вы
started sobbing.
начали плакать.
Does the sea
Является ли
disappear
море,
when the
когда
screen
экран
goes
погас?
dark? And a
Вопрос
question
вам.
for you, what
К
do
чему
your feelings
относятся
refer
ваши
to?
чувства? К экрану или к
To
морю?
the screen or to the sea? I hope you understand now where I'm going with this. I'll add even more twist in here.
Я там загну еще больше. А если я
If I
перемещу
transfer the
фото
photo to
на
another
другое
device, will the
устройство,
same sea be there as it was in
будет ли то
here?
же море, которое было вот здесь? Если мы говорим о море, вы
If we are
скажете,
talking
ой,
about the sea, will you say,
очень
I
люблю
love the
море.
device, and though I really love the sea?
И там может быть.
And meaning that it can be both here at this device and there. I see that someone doesn't like the
Кому-то море
sea.
не нравится.
Oh, well, that
Нормальным людям тыквы не
normal
нравятся.
people don't like
Вот и
pumpkins,
все.
so what?
Взаимно. И
they nevertheless mutually coexist. You see what I'm talking about? That attention to the screen, if you focus only on the screen, you begin to cut off perception. Now let's change the word death to the word merging. Imagine we are now talking about looking at the other as a picture on the screen. So this other one, he or she is an infinite soul, perhaps part of your soul. Then there is the physical world, which is the physical earth, the tuning or configuration. And then the being goes away. Where does it go? Look, here is a body left on the earth. It will become the earth very soon. Where did this being go? It has merged, integrated with you. It came back to you from here. You now have got a contact, direct contact with that being that you thought was alive, living in the body. You have taken away the gadget. The sea remained with you. A being, an animal, another person remained with you. And what happens? Change the word death to the word merging. Imagine that there's somebody whom you have lost. And until now, you have been saying that he had died. Now you could say, he has integrated with me. I had experienced merging. I had a merging with someone. See how different the perception is. And I am telling the truth. I am not attempting to pull wool over it. Let's call death a frump. It's a frump. And we will not be afraid of it. I'm telling it as it is, that it's merging. How do you know that it has happened? And if you really loved someone, you had a merging of love because you had a merging of I plus I, and this plus sign is inside of you. And here is the point that I have mentioned many, many times. Guys, I've said this many times. Where does this theme of suffering come from? It comes because you have merged with the beloved being. You became one, and he has multiplied around you in love. Yet, because you are looking at the gadget, you are saying, he is there, he's not here. This process, and it is the very basics of understanding vibrations in general. I've been talking about this in different webinars a million times. The very process of not accepting love is reflected as pain. When we resist the strongest feeling, we are in great pain. It is what resistance is. The principle of pain is resistance, that is rejection. One would say, I do not accept contact with you. Love has come to you and you say, I don't want to see it. I'll stare at the tablet. You have refused to accept the merging and you are in pain. If you accept the merging, it is simply impossible to experience pain. Technically speaking, if there is no object, there is no resistance, thus there's no pain. It doesn't work otherwise, so pain only comes like that. You simply don't give it fuel, no gas in the car doesn't run, that's it. You don't resist, you give in, you say merging. All right, now let me show you more. You see, when the merging has occurred, and if you stop fooling around, stop suffering, whining, moaning, screaming, and beating yourself up, if you have given in to the process of merging, and it has really become a part of you. Here's another question in the comments. Is it possible that there was a merging during life? Look, during your lifetime, you see this thing. Yes, you had a process of loving that you perceived, and they too, but we perceived it physically. And now this thing has left and you experience direct contact. The contact is so powerful. it engulfs you completely
физического
because now there is no physical barrier.
момента.
It's been
Да.
removed.
И вот это восприятие именно любви
And this is the perception of
накрывает вас
love that
на
envelops you, a
всю.
total merging.
Теперь, когда это у вас происходит, если
Now,
бы вы
when
перестали
it
страдать
happens
и
with you,
понаблюдали за собой,
if you were to
увидели
stop
себя,
suffering and would observe yourself, you would notice that,
допустим, мы сейчас говорим о животных, хотя люди тоже это делают,
let's say, now we are talking about
с
animals, but
животными,
people also do
да,
it to us,
у вас
or we do it
обостряется,
together with them.
видоизменяется определенное чувство, потому что
You would
это
notice, feel that some
это
of your
ваше
senses
существо
sharpen or
через
change
ваши глаза, через ваши
because
органы
this
начинает
being your,
видеть
let's say, pet,
развиваться,
starts looking at people
окружающее.
around you through your
И вы
eyes, through
смотрите
your
на
organs,
привычные вещи,
as
они
if
начинают
inside of you, and you look at familiar things
какой-то
and they
человек,
are a
вы
little
начали
different.
слышать
You
запах
suddenly
другого человека,
start to
или почему-то он
perceive
вам
the
нравится, а
smell of
почему-то
another
не нравится.
person, or
У
for
вас
some reason
отношение,
your
ну,
preference
поменяться
changes
там,
to
с
liking or
привычным
disliking
запахом
it.
там, цветов.
If
У
you
вас может
step
быть
back a
другая
bit,
реакция на
feel the presence,
запахи.
the contact, then you could
Ваше
experience,
зрительное
and this is very interesting to
восприятие
observe, you could
изменится. Или
develop
вы
a different
присмотритесь вместо
relationship with
того,
the
чтобы
familiar flower smells.
вместо того,
You
чтобы
may have a
ожидать
different
радости
reaction
и
to sounds
сопротивляться любви,
and even visual
вы
effects.
обратитесь,
That is, if you
почувствуете
look closely instead of
поверхность любви,
sobbing,
да?
crying, and resisting
Попробуйте
love,
ощутить
if
это,
you
это
open интересно.
интересно.
up to it, feel it,
Ужасно
first of all, the
интересно наблюдать.
presence, the
Именно
contact.
пробовать
Secondly, you will feel this
ощущать
is what is interesting to
это видеть.
observe
Ты
how my
делаешь замечание.
sensations have changed.
Вы чувствуете
I mean, where are you?
замечание.
You are here,
Внутреннее
you are with
состояние. Это
me,
очень интересное
and
явление,
you will
когда
feel that it
заметить
is a
свое
different
настроение.
attitude. Generally speaking, it is an
Это
inner state.
видеть.
It is a very interesting phenomenon observation,
То
and you
есть
can see a lot of things behind
это
it. And
существо
so
никуда
this being
убежало,
has
там
not simply run away,
отпустило, где-то
merged,
там
roaming
в другие
somewhere in other parts of the galaxy.
галактики. Именно из-за
But
того,
because of
что
this
вот
love,
это
this
любовь,
merging with
слияние
you,
с вами, у вас, ваше восприятие, ваше
your
ощущение
perception, your
расширилось.
feelings have expanded.
А, вот кто-то пишет, у него такое было.
Someone
Смотрите,
writes here they had
теперь
this kind of experience.
еще момент. Э, По-другому еще
Now,
животные
here's
могут
another thing.
пользоваться вами.
Looking at it differently, animals can also use you.
То есть они
In a
могут
way, namely, they can now choose
через
through
ваше
your
тело
body
выбрать, кем
what
бы
their
им
new
хотели
incarnation
быть
could be
себя.
like.
То есть поскольку
Since it is
с вами
easier to
есть
get in
живое я,
contact with
вот
you,
этот
in many
контакт,
cases, they choose
они во
some
многих случаях
animal
выбирают какое-то животное, чтобы продолжить коммуникацию
to continue communicating on the physical
на
level.
физическом уровне. На физическом уровне
On the
они
physical
могут
level, they can
даже
even go as far as to
присоединиться, да,
unite,
выбрать там
yes, to
быть
choose
зеброй,
to
условно
become a
говоря, потому
zebra,
что
for
вам сейчас
example.
зебра по
Because at this moment, a zebra
по вибрациям
corresponds to your
соответствует.
vibration.
Теперь. И очень
Now,
часто
and very often,
животные
by the way,
воплощаются,
animals
да,
incarnate in the form of
там птицы
birds.
прилетают,
Birds
когда
fly
они
around
хотят
and the
сбежать.
likes
Повторюсь, это не одна
because they
форма, это
felt
может быть
like
несколько.
flying.
Вот кто-то написал, я там
I
маленький
repeat, it is
животном,
not just
который
one form, there
что-то
can be
вкусное.
several of them.
Да, я знаю, это
Someone
хорошо,
is
что люди
writing,
ищут
yet we
страдания, чтобы
love
им
this
сломать
specific
девайс.
form.
Или им
Well,
стулья
so what?
купить
Yes, I know
какие-нибудь,
many
так
people
его сильно
suffer a lot when
расписали.
their device
Но
breaks,
море там
or
все равно
they have a hard time buying another one because they're so attached to the old one. But the sea out there
шутку, я
definitely
хотел
has no
сказать
relation to the
в личном
device,
отношении. Ну,
sorry to
это
say.
отрицание
And your
собственных
suffering that you
эмоций.
are experiencing has nothing to do with it
И
either. You
исследуйте
are just
именно вот
denying what's
поэтому,
coming to
когда
you.
животное хочет к вам
If you pursue this
вернуться,
path, suppose the
допустим,
animal
вы
wants to
говорите,
come
нет,
back to
ну,
you.
я там
It
требую.
wants to,
Но в нашем случае,
but you say,
допустим,
no, I
вот там у
demand
нас
the specific form. But
собака
in our
подобрала
case, let's say
форму,
our
вообще
dog came back
вообще
in
не
the same
отличить. То
form.
есть, ну,
It was exactly identical, absolutely
кошка
undistinguishable.
прошла, почувствовала.
Oh, the cat showed up.
Абсолютное было
She must have felt
Извините, я промыл.
it was absolutely. Wait a second, excuse me, I'm on air.
Кстати, пойдешь в камеру? Не хочет. Ладно. И вот. Собака была
So back
абсолютно в
here, the dog came
одинаковом
back in exactly the same body, right down to the spot.
теле
It
вернулась,
behaved absolutely identically.
вплоть
And the
до
cat
пяток.
decided to choose a
Была
different body
абсолютно
afterwards. That
идентична.
is, she was kind of
А
tiny,
кошка решила другое тело в
weighted
итоге
like a
выбрать. То
kilogram.
есть она была
They kept
слишком маленькая
stumbling,
такая,
kicking the poor
там,
thing. She
килограмм 10,
decided to
и
be faster, and yet it
определяется
feels the
цена где-то
same.
там.
A little
Она
bit
хотела
different,
быть
but absolutely
побыстрее.
the same soul,
И то же
perception,
самое
and so on.
ощущается, как, ну,
That is,
что-то
the animal will
чуть-чуть
always
по-другому
find you on its
двигаться. Ну,
own.
абсолютно та же самая
if after the merging
То
you
есть
want to
и
reconnect with,
животное само
to
себя
return,
ведет,
you
если
could just
говорить
follow your
более
inner feeling, inner guidance. I want to
если
go
вы
there
хотели соединиться, вернуть,
now,
да, вернуться,
this
вы просто идете по ощущениям
and
внутренним.
this,
Хочу туда, это, и
and it will come by
никаких
itself.
ошибок быть здесь не может быть.
There
То
can
есть
be
все
no
будут
mistakes here. It will be
совпадения, да,
coincidences. Let's call them this way.
синхроны вас приведут.
Synchronicities will
Еще,
lead your
смотрите, еще
way.
аспект важный, или вот
Another
говорить
important
условия, так
aspect
вот у
is,
меня
and it is
животное
difficult for
слилось
people to
со
grasp
мной,
this, say that my
допустим,
animal merged with me,
допустим, 1 числа, а вот
integrated, whatever you want to call it, on the first day of the month. Yet another animal was born in the previous month or later. If you look at the dates, no, it happens beyond time. We began this webinar with a concept that time does not exist. The animal can already incarnate into another animal in advance, knowing ahead of time that it will leave. Roughly speaking, it will prepare another body, then leave, and the body of another animal can already have a completely different lifespan. Right. Please comment if you incarnated without an animal at all. I didn't understand your question. Sorry. If you have parted with your beloved, the animal is gone. Look, this is a question of perception. The thing is that the specific nature of an animal's perception is such that it has a contact right now, right along the line of merging. It knows who it is and where it comes from. It has no attachment to a gadget. It moves easily from one device to another device. It just flows. That is, for him, it's kind of normal. It's our ego that does this. No, I like this device, the tablet. I don't like the phone, or vice versa. Transitions are very simple. Blink and you are there. That's how it sees it. I flow from one to another. It's absolutely normal. And when, let's say, some other person could have been something that both you and the animal were connecting with. So when people broke up, yes, the animal has left because it was not interested any longer, let's say, to continue the experience that was needed when you were together. And well, nothing happens to it. It just might decide that it doesn't need this body now, it'll just change to another body. It's that simple. Look, animals generally perceive themselves as part of nature. I would like to show an excerpt here. Maybe someone has heard about it. There was a gorilla that recently died. Coco, it was trained in sign language. And it knew, I don't remember exactly, around 2,000 words, I think. I mean, it could talk using sign language. There was a lot of speculation and so on. How and what it was, they did not believe it. They thought it was trained and so on. Why I am so sure about it is because a book was published recently. It was the researchers who kept this animal, the gorilla, and there were also other people who came to visit them and to communicate with it. So they saw that it wasn't training, that it was conscious. There was a conference on the protection of nature. I made a short clip. Here's what the animal says about itself, about people and about nature. Here you realize that the perception is direct. I'd like to show, let's just make two important notes. First, it is a certain translation of words, the perception of the animal into gestures, and then a translation, again by a human. Yes. I will explain a bit what the gorilla gestures are talking about. There. Have a look at what it looks like. Here's how the animal thinks in this piece. I'm a gorilla. I am flowers. I am flowers, animals. I am nature. Man. Man Coco loves earth. Earth love Coco. But man stupid. stupid. Nature sees you. Thank you. There are a lot of explanations, conversations about what it is thinking about, what's there. It's a long story. I've just emphasized here that it's a different perception, a different way of thinking. At least through the DNA of the gorilla, we can understand that it's different. It understands itself as I am flowers, I am nature. And it is telling you that nature sees you, a different perception. And what's more, you can also use animals, actually. It is a form of a mutual contract. When you need some kind of experience of the victim externally, yes, an animal can play the victim to suit your needs. Figuratively speaking, you have asked for it. The animal can deliberately participate in some seemingly unattractive event from a human point of view where something unpleasant happens. Or it could be an experience of aggression. Again, your animal can incarnate into something that time-wise doesn't matter, whether it was after, before, in childhood, or later. And if it is necessary, it will also be experience. So in fact, all these strong emotions are most likely your specific continuation of your I am, which use this structure to play out the scenario that you yourself have requested. Now, when we are talking specifically about love, we necessarily talk about merging because that's exactly what it is. And grief. I have already said that grief is you simply refusing to accept, and that's it. So if someone is crying or you are crying, you listened and decided, no, I will go and cry anyway. You simply refuse to accept, and that is your own decision. And I also want to emphasize that, yes, this aspect, this contact with, let's call it with that part of the soul, or with another part of the soul, both human and animal. I mentioned the evolution webinar here because the very idea of frames is described there. I will not dwell on it here, about how our perception is organized. There are frames of being, and between the frames we have a direct experience of this contact. The same thing happens in dreams. That is where we are at the point of contact. Why I'm making a remark here, because if anyone who wants it, who needs it, who is interested in this topic more deeply, there is webinar Evolution, where I've talked about this if you want to understand this topic more. And I realize it may be too far away for you, but that's your decision. Or if you are interested in physics, here's the free webinar Physics. To understand all this, where, how, in what the process of physical contact happens on the non-physical level. And now look, what else? It could be quite difficult. When the owner of the dog, I wrote merged. Well, picture a dog sitting here quietly watching a webinar and you are that dog. Your owner merged and you stayed here, as an option. The dog's owner left. The dog does not eat anything. It also left. It just decided. I was here for my owner. People are crying, look, the dog died. It ate nothing. It felt miserable. But it didn't feel miserable. It just decided to leave in this manner, that's all. Or the dog stayed. And there may be a reverse process. The owner has left and now there's more of his presence in the dog. It starts to behave strangely because the energy of a human being is very much present there. That story when the dog was coming in the movie, yes, it was a real story in Japan. The dog kept coming to the train station as if it waited for the owner. Actually, the owner and the dog were together for a long time. You don't ever have to look at it as a tragedy. There is always this process of mutual interflow of one into another. I mean, they feel each other well, or rather, we feel each other well. Once again, merging, 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 merging. Replace the words that you know. If we love a person, the process of love, I'm talking about unconditional love. In 99% of cases, people mean something else. I'm talking about unconditional love. Of course, the same process is taking place. We don't limit the subject to animals or not animals. It's the same process, and it's based on the same principle. If you perceive it as merging, you can feel the other person very well, perfectly well. Question from the audience: why is it that when the cat realized what I had seen, he walked around me, looked me in the eye, and cried? I don't know what exactly the question is. The emotions that you feel, the animal feels, first of all, through you. At the moment of departing, leaving this device, the animal feels that it comes to you in another way. Your emotion, here it is negative. This non-acceptance causes it additional pain. So what you feel, it also feels. It has a hard time with this process and this separation from the gadget. But it is rather something related to you. If you are going through love, it will be much, much easier. Okay. Another question. If my parents died, I mean left, does it mean I merged with them? Your parents, if you had a feeling of love completely preserved. There could be different relationships with parents, right? If your feeling of love is intact, of course, your contact right now is very much present. That's a given. Just understand what love is. Well, you see, I am not talking about love as some abstract concept. I'm talking about a very specific one. I mean, I have a separate webinar titled Love, where I am going in greater detail. Please understand me that the process of love, the physics of love, it's very tangible. It's not some beautiful feeling there knocked up from somewhere. It is a very clear, distinct connection. Can an animal be reborn? You mean as a human being? You didn't understand what we were talking about. This structure I've shown you, it's galactic in size, you know? You were born into it as humans, dogs, cats, monkeys, vipers. Some of you even managed to be born as pumpkins. And it is not necessary, if you were born as a pumpkin, to be reborn as a human or vice versa. You need to understand the structure that appears as a human being, the very structure of your higher self, is interested in this experience. The structure that you choose, prompted by your higher self, as, let's say, an animal, it is interested in this experience. Now, then you integrate here. In other words, you have merged, you have become one. You can then choose together. When you merge, you do not have legs and arms. I understand that in the movies they show the afterlife like they are walking there, drinking something, yet you don't have arms and legs. You are not balloons. You are a broad structure. You are one. That's why no one is born as a human. Maybe you were reborn as a reptiloid. A larger part of your personality exists simultaneously beyond time as someone else, something else, something else, something else, something else, something else. And it's not the same as one and the same person walking some strict line. So what we see here, like the dog, the cat, and so on, is not a sealed, closed-off structure. Could you tell us about the extraterrestrial experience? I hope I've covered what I promised to cover here. I'm not going to drag out the webinar and answer off-topic questions, so to speak. A lot of other things I've covered in other webinars. Please, a lot of information is available. So let me just summarize. If you have an experience of love with something living, it always stays with you forever. Forever. If you experience grief, this means that you give up this perception, but it's your choice. I hope I've helped at least one person to realize this and remove the feelings of pain and uncertainty. If you think it's been helpful, you could show it to people who need to see it. And to emphasize this feeling, here is a little song from a wonderful cartoon that I was once mesmerized by. I want people to hear it. You will understand what it is about. Ciao.
Где мы жили,
Как мы жили
улыбаясь,
и печались,
мы сегодня позабыли,
потому что повстречались навсегда,
навсегда.
навсегда. Мы не знаем, кто откуда, и забыли, кто мы сами. Только знаем это чудо, и случилось это с нами навсегда.